The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighting Controls Podcast. If you're checking this podcast out on Get a Grip on Lighting's website, hopefully you're going to find your way over to the Lighting Controls Podcast's website, which is lightingcontrolspodcast.com. That's where this podcast is going to be formally hosted going forward. Today, we have a great guest, Dan Hollenkamp Jr. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Toggled, which is TOGGLED.com. They are also the sponsor of this episode, and we want to thank them for sponsoring this episode. Ron also has some great information about them.
Awesome. Yeah, we cannot thank Toggled enough for sponsoring the show today. Toggled is part of a global tech leader that provides software and cloud solutions for simulation, IoT, high-performance computing, data analytics, and AI. They have a grassroots approach to NLC, network lighting controls. They've added radio to linear lamps and expanded from there. Did you know that Toggled's LED linear lamps feature Bluetooth? And that is completely unique to the industry. Existing direct wire retrofits are just a tube swap away, and with the Bluetooth integrated into the lamps, you add controls just like that. Wireless is ideal for adding controls to existing buildings, no teardowns needed. Cybersecurity, they've got you covered. Toggled has all of that. They've got all the appropriate certifications obtained, and with an optional gateway, you can connect to the cloud. But if not, you can operate standalone without any issues. There are no fees for API integration. So if you're connecting up to another system, how cool is that? No one else is doing that. I can't imagine anyone else is offering no fees. They're truly customer-centric approach to network lighting controls. Toggled views buildings holistically versus segmented control. Seamless integration of all systems working together, which we all know is something very important to us.
So there you go. Check out Toggled at TOGGLED.com to check out their no added fee API services and their LED linear tubes with Bluetooth technology added in. And also, we just want to mention that this podcast is presented by the LCA, Lighting Controls Association, and is also financially supported by NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Thanks so much. And now, over to Dan. Welcome, everyone, to the Lighting Controls Podcast, where we like to talk about lighting and controls. We're your hosts, Webster Marsh and Ron Kuszmar, and today we have a special guest, Dan. Dan, do you mind giving us a quick pitch on who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Dan Hollenkamp. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Toggled. Toggled is a linear lighting manufacturer and now controls manufacturer also.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And, one of the reasons we wanted to talk with you today is because, while you're a lighting and controls manufacturer, your parent company is actually not in the industry at all for lighting. It's in the tech industry and does a lot of IoT applications. But, what brought you into our small industry and what interested you about it?
Sure. So it's actually kind of a long story, but so I'll back up a little bit, just give you a little background of kind of where Toggled even came from to begin with. So Altair is a publicly traded global technology company, and we provide software, cloud solutions in the area of product development, high performance computing, data analytics, and simulation. So lots of simulation CFD. Traditionally was the aerospace and automotive industry. In the late 1990s, Altair was doing research on the reducing total life cycle costs of a city transit bus, and resulted in a bunch of innovations related, powertrain, heating and cooling, structures. And one thing that was realized that the lighting systems on buses actually require a lot of maintenance, and they were based on fluorescent linear lights. So we ended up developing and patenting the foundational patents for TLEDs, basically for the concept of replacing a fluorescent lamp with a linear lamp with LEDs in it. And At the time, it honestly didn't make a ton of sense from the efficiency standpoint. At that time, LEDs, they're really expensive, and efficacy was barely better than incandescent, right? After
Right.
all power conversion and everything. So kind of put it in our back pocket, sat on it for a while, and by 2007, it was obvious that LED was going to just dominate the lighting industry. It was gaining traction, and we had these patents, and decided to form a company and start manufacturing T8 linear lamps. So
Mhm.
did well. We were manufacturing in the U.S. for a while. Kind of rode the whole race to the bottom in the lamp market. And about 5-6 years ago, we were looking at kind of what's next.
Mhm.
And being a lighting company in a commercial building, I think we were all open our eyes. It's not the same as home. We got 277, much larger circuits. Phase dimmers weren't that common, and it seemed like dimming was an issue, right? It was hard to install a system. First of all, 0 to 10 wiring, not to mention the cost was extremely high to get dimming and scenes, just in a simple conference room. So we kind of started with controls, just simply, how do we dim, in a commercial building easily, low cost. So we started before, when Bluetooth mesh was just kind of in its infancy, before there was any even thought of SIG mesh. We started putting some Bluetooth radios in tubes, which was kind of unique at the time. 6 years ago, it wasn't that common. Made
Well,
some
I'd say
switches.
it's still pretty uncommon right now.
Still, yeah. Radios in lamps isn't as common in the commercial. It's much more prevalent in residential consumer
Mhm.
industry, but agree, yeah, in the commercial space, it's not that common. And then it kind of evolved from there, right? So it was okay. We have a nice dimmer remote, and we have linear lamps that dim. And you're like, okay, we need downlights because most conference rooms have downlights, and from there was like, well, motion sensors make sense, right? So, and right about the time we were developing our motion sensor, just looking at what was available, it's like, oh, temperature sensors are really cheap. Ambient light sensors are really cheap, right? So you can start putting all these things into a single sensor, and now we have a device that's generating data, right?
Mhm.
And that was kind of the aha moment for us. We were like, this is not even about lighting controls anymore, right? This is about building an IoT network and gathering information about what's going on in the space. So that was kind of foundational in how we ended up developing the system. Really, really data driven, and that's kind of where it's pulled us back to our parent company, because
Mhm.
we were kind of this physical products company, and our parent company was mostly software. And we're kind of diverging, going the opposite directions, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we have data here, and that's what we do in our parent company. Is like, so we started kind of converging back. So now we're leveraging what we're doing in the building space. We're leveraging what our parent company's expertise is in data science and simulation, and really our lighting system slash IoT building control distributed control system is now kind of a front end physical connector to the data software world.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a long
No, but I
story
mean
of kind of how we've gotten to where we are, but
it's fascinating because it's you followed a trajectory that is uncommon, at least from my understanding of how manufacturers in our industry go about this. Because while they do kind of, they're the existing behemoths, and then they're the new faces in the crowd. Um, when it comes to lighting controls, they usually start with the luminaire rather than the lamp, the actual
Mhm.
component inside of the fixture. They go, okay, we have this big housing, and then well, we need to control this big housing fixture. How do we do that? And then they kind of expand out from there. Whereas you started with a lamp, and then you also went to the sensor and went, oh, this is like a central hub of data. And then you went to, oh, we can use this data because our parent company manages data all the time. Whereas other manufacturers will go, oh, we need to manage data? No, that's not us. Or, oh, yeah, well, we'll have to create an offshoot of our company to manage that because there's huge legal liability with all that data. So, whereas you kind of went, oh, there's a way we can dovetail business, and so you ended up with this really interesting infrastructure for a lighting controls manufacturer. And so I think it's a fresh take, but not a bad take, because one thing that I do see a lot in our industry is new manufacturers coming in, kicking the door in, saying, "Okay, you guys are doing it wrong. We're going to fix everything for you." And they get bucked so fast, and they just get burned because everybody's already got their method. And
Mhm.
somebody coming in and saying, "Change your method, do it our way," that doesn't help. That just makes people go, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And whereas with you guys, it seems almost like you provided a solution and then you were like, okay, well, how do we make this solution easy to utilize in this industry? Again, it's uncommon to see a fluorescent LED replacement lamp with a controls component inside of it, because normally if you're talking about a lighting control solution for retrofit applications in a fluorescent situation, you're talking about just gutting the fixture, replacing the lamps with LED efficiencies, and then providing a controls component that's unrelated to that LED
Mhm.
lamp that you've just used.
Yeah.
So having that is unique. It does kind of shake things up a little bit, but not necessarily in a bad way, because we do see fluorescent ballast bypass all the time. It's just you don't normally go, oh, there's controls inside of that thing. You go,
Yeah.
oh, well, it's more efficient than a fluorescent lamp, so done.
Yep. Yeah. We've always been focused on how do we drive adoption. So even in our traditional products, just a standard TLED, we've been innovating there, trying to make things easier and easier, right? So and also add value for the customer, right? So we've been providing at Big Box, we've been providing a dimmable fluorescent replacement lamp now for 5-6 years, and it's just nice, right? Because it's like
Mhm.
I used to have this fixture in my kitchen that was fluorescent, and I had on and off, and I upgraded to LED, which is great. But it's like, well, what else can we do? Because we've just gotten the same result, right? It's just, we're just still producing light, and nothing's changed other than we're using a little bit less energy. Perhaps our CRI is a little bit higher, right? But being able to put a phased immovable lamp in there, now I can go buy a $20-$30 dimmer, and I have new functionality, right? And I didn't have to gut it. I didn't have to worry about paint lines on my ceiling, all that kind of stuff. And we just keep trying to make things easier to push adoption. So even in those products, we're now offering pre-wired lamp holders, right? So we give you a lamp holder that has pigtail on it, and it's a no-brainer. I know my black wire goes to black and white goes to white, and I don't have to worry about the yellow, blue, red, whatever's in the fixture. Just most people don't want to mess with that, right?
Right.
It's challenging enough to open a fixture for consumers. So we've kind of used that methodology as we've moved into the control system also. And how do we make it easy for people to adopt control systems? Because there's an issue of adoption, right? How do you, I mean, that's why there's rebates. It's trying to get people to adopt these technologies, because overall they're good for the environment. They're good for buildings. They're good for the utilities. So and then that's where making a linear lamp with a radio in it was kind of the next progression, right? So it's like we already have a facility. We've replaced, gone to a Type B retrofit and then it's like now it's just a lamp swap, and now you have controls, right? So
Right.
it's kind of a staged approach where, we have a lot of TLEDs that have been in use for well over 5-6 years now. And it's kind of like, well, what's next for those installations, right? Because we know the LED's not going to last forever; it's going to be replaced. And also, there's a lot of situations where you don't want to replace a fixture. right? You like the fixture, or finding something of that quality is really difficult in today's market. Fixtures used to be a lot more expensive than they are today, and they might have lasted longer too. Their build quality was a little bit higher. So having that linear lamp that has the controls in it allows you to perhaps there's some you're going to replace most of it with panels or integral troughers, but there's a few fixtures that you're just having a hard time finding a replacement. So you have this to be able to incorporate the entire project. And in fact, sometimes you just don't want to know what's in your ceiling. You don't want to know what's in the walls. We have a project going on up in Canada right now, pretty large installation, and we weren't planning on doing many linear lamps, but we got into one of the offices and realized that there's asbestos. And if we had to do abatement, it would have thrown the entire budget of the project, right? But because we can stay below the ceiling plane, replace if we switch those were like no more replacing the fixtures, no more secondary controllers. We're just going to swap the lamps, and it saved the project, right? So there's a lot of unknowns, and so just having that tube in your back pocket is you just can save the day sometimes.
Right. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dan, you mentioned obviously the big box store, right? And we're obviously talking about controls and some of your commercial applications. Would you mind telling our viewers and our listeners something, a little bit about the two different applications, what you have for the box stores versus what you have for commercial, some of the different technology that's in the two, so they understand?
Sure. So for our consumer sales, big box, we've kept it extremely simple. We've really just kept it to phase dimmable. I still see most of the networked lighting at home, whether it's Zigbee or Wi-Fi. It's a novelty. Ultimately, it's not. It's providing some automations, making your life a little bit easier. Might save a little bit of energy here and there because you forget to turn the lights on and off, your outdoor lights or something like that. But the actual payback it's hard to get the payback in that situation, right? Because what you're spending on it and your energy costs or your actual energy usage is fairly small compared to commercial spaces. So the commercial solution, which is where we have the full networked lighting controls, just because saving a few percent in a commercial building can be substantial savings, and often combined with the rebates, your payback is much quicker. Where in your consumer space you may not actually realize that return, but it's nice. I have connected lighting in my house. I'm always tinkering with automations and those things, but I don't expect to see I'm not looking at ROI for my home. It's
right.
So yeah, keeping it really simple for homeowners. And there's so many different systems in where the phase dimmer, there's so many connected phase dimmers. It's easy to just these lamps to work with what you have.
Well, yeah. and so, I mean, the thing here that's interesting, because, we'll see this a lot with lighting controls, is they'll have consumer level stuff in big box stores, and then they'll have their specification grade, is what we usually call it, in lighting controls for commercial applications. But it's almost like you don't want the intelligent components to be consumer grade. You want the intelligent components to be at the specification grade, so that you have somebody who understands the system, kind of making sure that it's installed and programmed correctly. Whereas with the consumer grade stuff, it's really just meant to be plug and play, and that's it.
Yeah, I think we'll probably make our way back around to the consumer market with some more of the advanced things, but I think for right now it's more of a distraction for us. We're really trying to focus on making the commercials. So we're actually trying to make the commercial experience as easy as what people are using in their homes, right? It's fairly easy to commission lights in your home. There's not a whole lot of work outside of pairing your device to your network, maybe set up a few scenes. So we're really trying to actually what already exists in that space is what we're bringing to the commercial market. And like I said, we haven't been focused on the home assistant integrations and all those things, which we feel is mandatory in that market. We've been focusing more on understanding lighting behaviors and user interaction and making the system comply with all of the different energy requirements and ordinances that are coming out. And then also just, the big data aspect. Insights in your home is again, it's nice. But it's kind of, still kind of a novelty, right? You look at the data and it's like, oh, that's this room, people were in this room at this time, people were in a room at this time. It just doesn't translate into, it doesn't economically have a huge advantage, right?
What data are you seeing most utilized right now in commercial applications?
So right now, still the largest use of the data is occupancy data and in temperature data. So we connect. We have a gateway if you choose to add it to the system, right? So our entire system can be isolated from the internet. After it's been set up, you could delete your app off your phone. You could delete your account, and it just will keep working forever in that state. So you don't have to have a gateway. You don't have to have cloud connectivity once it's set up. But we have a gateway, and we bridge to building BMSs with it. So like BACnet or Modbus. Honestly, the largest use of our data right now is pushing occupancy data to a BMS for HVAC control. So
and that's pretty consistent throughout the industry, and that's why we see a lot of BACnet native manufacturers out there right now. But I mean, it's curious because you have the ability to collect so much more data with your sensor because it's an omni tool as opposed to having to specially select, okay, I need a daylight sensor here, I need an occupancy sensor there. So having the ability to collect all of that aggregate data no matter what is unique. And so I was just curious if you saw any deviation from the norm, but it sounds like it's pretty consistent.
Yeah, so that I would say that's still the largest use case. We have a few pilots where we're doing a few things a little different. The site in Canada I mentioned, they rent out a lot of their facilities a lot, and we have energy metering on all the devices, including plug load controllers. And a use case there is we're actually looking at being able to bill the entity that's renting the space on how much energy they used, because it varies widely whether they have a trade show going on or some other activity. The energy consumption from a week's long trade show or event could be drastically different based on who's in that space. So that's one use case we're looking at is just understanding the energy footprint and potentially allowing the property owner to charge appropriately for that use. A lot of times you go to a trade show and they what you get charged for an outlet is extremely high, right? You end up paying a ton of money for an outlet, and it's like I didn't really use much power, so being able to fairly charge in those situations is an interesting use case. Another thing we're looking at is where we're doing a rollout with a large retail chain right now, and we're looking at using motion sensors to look at basically the density of motion in different areas of the store. All right, so understanding
which
where
displays
people
are drawing attention
exactly, and at what time of the day, and then just in general, like when are we have heavy traffic in the store? When do we not? And that can help with staffing or just even understanding what displays are working, what displays aren't. And then if you can, compare that data with the actual, receipts, you start to get a lot of information. So that's what we're really looking at is what can we do now with the data.
And I mean, I guess Out of curiosity on my end with integrations and stuff, Ron here is a third-party integrator who is completely agnostic to manufacturers. Do you oftentimes see requests for third-party integration, or do you see more just your own tech services being able to provide a lot of the integration on site?
We do provide integration whenever it's necessary. So we have a pretty
Mhm.
open platform, APIs. We can consume pretty much any API. So yeah, but we do try. If we see something popping up a lot, we will try to make a native product that
Mm.
works with our products. One thing I've noticed is this is kind of SIGMesh and even with Zigbee is you have a ton of manufacturers all working on the same network,
Mhm.
but who's responsible for it to actually work right?
Yes.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
why we're still kind of, at least our Bluetooth mesh, we're still kind of in our own ecosystem. And we do connections to third parties through our gateway at the moment, just because
Mhm.
we own it, right? We want to make sure it works perfectly. We want to make sure that the installer is not getting callbacks because it's not working. So really supporting our installers and our integrators right now, so that the project goes perfect from beginning to end, and everyone in the end is happy. And there's nothing worse than getting a call back, because the lights keep turning off every 5 minutes, or they won't turn off, or like this, so really. And that's critical for adoption also. If things don't work, if it causes frustration, these systems won't be installed.
So, I mean, from a number standpoint, then you try to provide a solution either via a API or some other backend. Um, but do you roll that cost into a project? Because I mean, one of the big pushbacks on any integration, especially hiring somebody like Ron, is that the price tag shoots through the roof, at least in comparison to what the owner's expecting. And
Mhm.
so, do you just anticipate having to provide an API on every project that has a gateway, or is there like some give and take to that?
Yeah, so we don't charge for our API, so it's pretty open. And if the solution's been developed, if we're not doing it specifically for a project, yeah, we don't charge for integration either. Um, you know, Depending on how much, what devices are connected and how much data is coming in, we usually end up charging for third-party devices if we're trending data and using it as part of the solution. But that's about it. That's about where we're at.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've seen a lot of that also, where we've been
Yeah.
connecting with other systems. And yeah, the third party will be charging, and then it's like, well, if I charge too, like it just
Yeah.
gets out of control, and then it just
Well,
doesn't happen, right?
I think that that's great. I mean, a lot of manufacturers will draw a line in the sand and say, no, we don't do that, or
Right.
it's going to cost extra to do that. And so that's where Ron comes into play to make sure that, you know, he basically hovers over all manufacturers and goes, okay, this is how they're all going to interconnect. But it's almost like you guys are like, well, we have a software solution. So long as we can connect to the devices, we can communicate with the devices, and you don't even charge extra for that, which I think is a refreshing thing to hear, because a lot of other manufacturers, I'm not saying all manufacturers, but a decent number will look at that and go, oh, there's a profit margin in there.
Yeah,
So you know it's
yeah,
nice to hear that you guys are really looking at it and going, it's just data, like it's not that expensive.
right, yeah. So that's where, right, we won't charge for the integration. Like if the connector's there, but we will, like I said, we will charge for the cloud services,
Hmm.
that consuming that data and doing things with it. But
Right.
yeah, I mean,
Well, but
even our own products, we don't charge anything, for them, right? Like you get a perpetual license for the Bluetooth stack and everything on there, and you can use our mobile app and even our web app. It's just when you get the gateway in there and we start streaming data and analyzing things and all that, that's when we start charging, just because
sure.
there is overhead there, cloud costs, we want to continue to develop that, and it brings a lot more value, right?
And ongoing service agreements. I mean, that's a consistent thing nowadays, especially when you're dealing with that much data. Um, but I mean, I think as far as data goes, cybersecurity is also a big concern. And so I'm curious,
Yes.
how you approach that.
So from the, we've done like the UL cybersecurity. We use a lot of different cloud based analysis tools, and this honestly this is where we're lucky that our parent company has
Right.
developed their own IoT cloud platform. So we kind of get to ride on their coattails a bit. But yeah, it's all secured from the cloud standpoint. As any other major cloud provider would. And then from the the device standpoint, it's your typical Bluetooth encryption, and we do all the certifications and testing constantly. But yeah, I mean it is an issue, and this is where you know we also offer the controls without the cloud connectivity, because there's just some people who it's not they can't take that risk tolerance, right? They don't have that risk tolerance. um, but there's also some people who don't even want to, they've called it a shadow network or whatever, right? They're so paranoid about security that they'll never have a wireless control system ever in their facility. But that's fine.
Right.
I get it. Sometimes
I,
there's a lot
I
of
would
money.
say that the number of people who feel that way is diminishing, especially because of consumer experience with wireless. So I think nowadays it's almost like, well, wireless, okay, maybe. Whereas 10 years ago they'd be like, what? No.
Right.
So I think we're definitely moving in a better direction with adoption and wireless controls.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
from a security standpoint, you're only really looking at motion data and temperature data and lamp hours, things like that. We're not talking about cameras or anything in your devices, right? So from a security standpoint, people need to understand that you're not doing face tracking and all that crazy stuff that everyone's all worried about.
Right. The data is fairly anonymous. Hack and okay, Bluetooth is extremely low bandwidth. There's only so much you could even do if you had gained access to the network, and all of our devices fail on, right? So if something happened, the lights turn on. So it kind of puts you at least in a you're not sitting in the dark. Situation, where it could be dangerous or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's there's not a whole lot you can do, right? You might be able to turn someone's lights on and off. Worst case, change a temperature set point, but most heating and cooling systems have protections anyways, where if it got too cold or too hot, it would shut down or kick in. So yeah, I mean, it's still pretty secure, even if someone had gained access to the system.
I mean, I
And
guess
all
to
and all the
throw a wrench into that, with asset tracking, that does kind of create identities to a degree, but it sounds like once it gets pushed through the internet to your cloud service, that's really on the hands of Altair. It's not even really your um, it is toggled, but it's more of like you have this parent company that knows how to manage IoT, does it on a regular basis, and can firewall and block out any hack attempts for the most part. So, I mean, yeah, we see a lot of companies getting hacked and a lot of these concerns. I just got like 3 emails the other day from different companies that got hacked, and it's like, what are you guys doing? Like,
yeah.
so at the same time, the infrastructure that's there with your parent company is almost readily prepared for all this, as opposed to having to go, oh, okay, we need to shell out extra money for this service.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So we have the encryption in the building level at the network, and then it's end to end encryption all the way from the gateway all the way to the server. So yeah, it's and monitored from a much larger user standpoint than just our lighting system that's also riding on the system. So yeah. Yeah.
Out of
Like I said,
curiosity, with the fact that it's your tech offshoot, But a lot of what Altair in construction would be specified would be in Division 27, I imagine. Whereas Toggled is more Division 26. Do you have a better way of working with IT groups during the design and construction process? Because I know that's a major heartburn with a lot of designers.
No.
I appreciate your honesty.
No,
I appreciate your honesty. No, I mean, yeah.
No, we have cellular gateways available for our. It's. I get it. Again, it's the guys who are in charge of the network infrastructure. They don't want anything that might cause them more work or cause a vulnerability. Right? It's really difficult. It's really difficult to get IT to play ball. We often sit on calls, talking about this port needs to be opened and this port needs to be opened, and I don't understand, like, how are we still not getting any traffic? And it's just like, because they're so locked down, right? So a lot of times you'll just be like, let's put our gateway outside your network, either through some kind of DMZ or through cellular. And it's the same reason. It's the same reason a lot of backnet networks they're not connected to an IT network, right? And that's actually our gateway. We have multiple Ethernet ports where we actually route data from backnet to the internet for analysis, because the stuff's so out of date that no one wants to put it on their network, because it is an attack vector. But that's where we.
So now, are you talking
secure those networks?
Backnet IP or also SMTP?
Yeah, backnet IP.
Sure. So if you have like an existing backnet IP building, then you can connect it. But if it's an old backnet system, then there would need to be some intermediary to allow it to connect to IP.
Yeah, we just use a converter. There's
Oh, sure.
We don't actually make one, but there's plenty of converters out there that basically it's a backnet IP interface.
So I mean, if I have an old facility that's backnet and I want to connect it to the internet, I would just get your gateway and this third-party device and done.
Yeah. We actually we have a lot of customers. So Toggled, we've even kind of branched outside of just lighting already. We have a lot of customers that we just pump data from buildings to the cloud. So there's nothing to do with lighting at all. We're literally pulling backnet data and pushing it to the cloud for analysis, to look at
that's really funny. Systems. That's really funny, because it's almost like you're going the opposite direction of some big BAS or BMS companies that are trying to penetrate the lighting controls market. There are several names of big companies out there who have been trying. Granted, they've had some moderate success with big campuses, but you guys are going the opposite direction. You're going towards BMS, BAS control from lighting controls. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's a common thing. Do you hear about that, Ron?
No, it's not common at all. I mean, you're right. You hear more manufacturers trying to shove their product in order to then provide that integration, not someone who will come in and say, we don't care if you don't have our product. Here, take this and we'll get you on the online.
Right. So, I mean, that's also just a fresh take in our industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, buildings have traditionally been pretty siloed, right, into different, whether it's electrical and plumbing and heating and cooling, security systems, right? It's all been siloed, and there's lots of data information in all these systems, and it's just been siloed where it doesn't matter if the security system sees someone in this area, like the lighting system doesn't know about it, and the heating and cooling system doesn't know about it. So, I see it as a logical progression of all these systems need to start converging into kind of at least sharing data, if not sharing control and intelligence.
Yes.
I mean, look at every other product on the market right now are highly integrated, right? Like look at a car, like right. Every system in that car communicates and works together. Buildings don't, right? And so, especially like mid and small size business buildings, there's nothing for them, right? Like all the systems are completely separate. If you have a large enough building where putting a BMS was made sense at the time, that's great. But a lot of buildings don't have that luxury. So,
Mhm.
you know, that's where we're trying to, it's not a lighting network we're building. We're building an IoT network. You know, it's a distributed buildings control network.
Mhm.
And that's what we've really been focused on, is also making sure that all of the controls distributed. We don't have a central controller, because things can't fail. Things just can't stop working, right? You know, like I lost the internet and I can't turn my lights on anymore. It's like, that's not acceptable
Right.
ever.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah,
like
we were talking about that a few episodes ago, where basically a company just pulled the rug out from under everybody, and their devices stopped working. They just bricked their devices because they couldn't connect to the cloud server anymore.
yeah, that can't happen. That can't
No.
happen.
Right.
Like, yeah,
I completely agree. And so, yeah, I mean, those are the things that need to be thought about when it comes to our industry and our systems, is like, look, okay, what's going to happen 10 years down the road? There are a number of manufacturers who got burned because Silverlight stopped being supported, and they
Yes.
based their software on Silverlight. And so they're like, well, like, what are we going to do now? What about the projects that we just sold? What about the projects that just got built? What about the projects 5 years ago got built? Like, and so they had to, unfortunately, a number of them had to say, okay, well, if you want continuing support, you need to pay us extra money. Whereas, from your perspective, it sounds like if that were to happen, you would just go, oh, well, we'll just push the firmware update.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, like I said, we're not on SIGMesh yet. All of our hardware is compatible.
Hmm.
It's literally just a firmware push away to go to SIGMesh. So, you know, if we probably were closing the doors, if that ever happened, we would probably just make that final, firmware available, just to
Interesting. So
say,
you would just push it to an open protocol.
yeah. I mean, I think that's better than leaving customers stranded, right? I mean,
No,
that's
totally. I don't think I've ever heard of that, though, because I mean, proprietary protocols is sort of the standard in our industry, at least in North
yeah,
Yep.
America. I mean, in Europe, they've got a number of open protocols they like to use in lighting controls, but in North America, we love our proprietary protocols. But
yeah,
normally, it's kind of like, okay, that's it. It's not like they're gonna push out Open Dolly to all of their devices so that they just speak Dolly if they stop supporting them. So, I mean, that's honestly a great sale point right there, is to say, if 5 years down the road our business folds, it's just going to be an open standard at that point.
yeah. And honestly, I'd love to get an open. I'm pushing, and I would love to get to an open standard today.
So
I
would
think we
we.
all would.
Yep.
I just feel like we're taking a step back, right? Right. As it currently stands, I feel like we'd be taking a step back, right? We wouldn't be able to scale as large. We wouldn't be able
Right.
to control things the way that we like to control things, pass data the way we like to control, to do
Yeah.
so. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I think the technology will mature. I think there'll be changes, and I think we'll get closer to that. I mean, eventually it probably become is just like TCP/IP or some networking protocol where it's like it doesn't matter who made your computer anymore. Like it just works. I can plug an Ethernet cable in, and I know, or Wi-Fi, and I know I'm going to be able to connect. Eventually, I think we'll get there. I don't think we're there today.
No. But
Especially
yeah,
just
no, there is demand. There's growing demand to go open with everything. But like you said, when it comes to going to an open protocol, you need to take the good with the bad. And everybody has their own baked version of protocol because there's one thing they wanted to do that's better than what the open protocol had. And so that's the roll of the dice is, okay, you go open, but now you don't get this feature that you originally had.
right. Yeah. And those, our, because we're so focused on data and
Mhm.
working with that data, the actual protocol to us isn't as important, right?
Mm,
So and that's where, working with third parties, we're still collecting data from those
yep.
buildings. We're collecting information that we can use to take action within that building to either make it more comfortable or more efficient, or last longer, make all the devices last longer. And ultimately where that data comes from isn't as important. as long as we can get the data out and we can push new control algorithms or rules back to those devices so that they know how to handle the building appropriately.
Totally. Well, we're almost out of time, but I like to encapsulate, what we discussed here, just to kind of summarize everything, because I think we've covered a lot of interesting ground here. So you're with Toggled, which is an offshoot of Altair, which is a tech industry IoT business. And so you just kind of started with a grassroots approach with just replacing LED or fluorescent tubes with LEDs, but then putting a radio in there and having that communication. But also at the same time, because you have this parent company, you have the ability to really manage all this data, and not really risk as much, because you can trust that their experience, their knowledge is going to be able to support the infrastructure that you have. At the same time, it's also very easy for you to integrate with everything. It's more of like, what is it that you're integrating with, rather than how are you going to integrate with it? And so that really gives you a robust position within our industry to kind of shake things up, not in a bad way. I mean, I say, a lot of companies come in and try to shake the cage and change things. But really what you're doing is you're looking at the industry going, okay, this is what we can provide. And then you go, well, here's an easier way of providing that, as opposed to here's a better way, or, this is where we're going to make more money or something like that.
Right.
And then, that while that may put people like Ron out of business if that were the only model in our industry, the reason why Ron exists is because that's uncommon in our industry.
Right.
It's the ability to just go, yeah, sure, just tell us what you need, and it's not even an added cost to do that.
Right.
And so, ultimately, hopefully we'll see some sea change with this kind of perspective, because I think that it's really a new way of looking at things, which personally I appreciate in our industry.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear that you're focused on the holistic building too, right? Like, too many people are just, we have lighting controls and we have a way for you to access our platform, but you guys really are focused on the holistic building, and how do we integrate with HVAC, and how do we integrate with this, and how do we integrate with that? And not everyone is taking that approach. And to be so customer focused, to be able to provide a BACnet IP device for an existing system that's not yours, is really taking that next step above to really show the customers that you care and that you're there for them, and speaks to the data collection abilities that you guys have to be able to offer that kind of service, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
The one thing I will say, now that we've buttered you up, is the cautionary tale of connecting residential and commercial, because all too often people will say, well, smartphone you can control with our app and it's just as easy as working at home. Well, the way residential and commercial works in our industry, very different, and the contractors are very different, and the knowledge and experience is very different. And so while it's great, I think you do have the clear separation there with the line voltage dimming versus your smart system. Don't overestimate the capabilities of the people actually installing the stuff, because while the owner may be really tech savvy, the contractor may actually still be at wire nuts and Wago connectors and everything. So there is a limitation there. And we do see there are fantastic contractors out there who are knowledgeable and really able to do a lot of great things, but we also see contractors who bite off more than they can chew and get burned really hard.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the systems are becoming easier to install, easier to commission, which is helping. But yeah, I'm not seeing electricians just go install these systems independently of some other controls integrator at this point still, right? There's definitely some hand holding that has to happen. We're working every single day to make it easier and easier, so that barrier is being broken down, because I think that's also part of the adoption issues. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, we need to keep making it easier and easier, so that even electricians can install it. But I don't expect that to happen in the near term. I still think we have a few years of controls integrators, controls installers still helping.
Yeah, I would agree. And even the most foolproof system can be broken very easily by somebody who doesn't understand that, oh, that wasn't supposed to connect to line voltage, that was supposed to connect to low voltage or something like that.
Right.
So,
Or even just the what's required, right? So
right.
depending on what region you're in, there's rules and laws that require specific control patterns, and you may not be familiar with them, right? So there's also that the regulatory standpoint also. So again, try to make our system start to do some of that for you based on where it's being installed automatically. But there's a long ways to go to make a system set itself up.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and I wish you luck in your endeavor to hopefully change our industry for the better.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Well, hopefully you got a lot out of that podcast with Dan. He was a great resource, a lot of great information about Toggled and just the industry as a whole. Again, we want to thank our sponsor, Toggled, TOGGLED.com. Again, Ron's going to give you a little breakdown on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So do not forget to go check out toggled.com and be sure to check out their LED linear lamps with Bluetooth, unique to the industry. Existing direct wire retrofits are just a tube swap away from adding controls, no tear downs needed. Don't forget about their no fees for API integration and the fact that they view building controls holistically versus segmented systems.
Thanks, Ron. Check out Toggled, TOGGLED.com. We want to mention that this podcast is presented by the Lighting Controls Association and financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Thanks so much, Dan, and see you next time.